Edward Island. Great to have some representation from PEI. Okay. So we do have a few additional participants joining, but everybody is welcome to join in the chat. But we will get started because we have a very tight agenda for today that I'm really delighted to be diving into. So hello, everyone. For those that don't know me, my name is Kayla Isabel, and I'm the Executive Director here at Startup Canada. As many of you know, one of our flagship programs at Startup Canada is called the Canadian Export Challenge. This year, obviously, we are taking this national program completely digitally, and in addition to our September program, where we will be having pitch competitions, workshops, panels, all with the focus to get entrepreneurs across Canada ready to go global. We've decided to do a series of boot camps and virtual accelerators in the months leading up to that September program to prepare entrepreneurs and to give them information during COVID-19 as we look to the future in our sort of adjusted reality, and getting different perspectives from those that we haven't been able to chat through during those regional events. So we've had tremendously successful boot camps, bringing together thousands of entrepreneurs from across Canada and now internationally, particularly with today's conversation, talking about various topics. We've been looking at e-commerce, marketing your startup globally, looking at funding opportunities, having different conversations about the export environment, all with the intention of putting Canada on the global stage. How can we connect internationally? How can we leverage existing infrastructure that is already existing, and also revise how we export under this new environment? So today's session is really on getting that international perspective. And for us, we are really delighted to be bringing together a number of our international partners today that I will introduce in a moment. But this session is very much intended to give you information really from key people in our network who understand their particular export environments and who can support you in your exporting journey. So today, I would love to take the opportunity to introduce our various panelists that we are going to be joined by over the next few minutes. This hour-and-a-half session is going to be jam-packed, but we'll try to take as many questions as we can throughout the session. So our first speaker is going to be Jonathan Ehrlich, who is the Economic and Trade Attaché from the Israeli Embassy Canada at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Israel. During the 2017 to 2019 time period, Jonathan was a manager of business development and sales for the largest Apple premium reseller in Israel. He's also managed a chain of 18 stores nationwide, B2B sales netting approximately 150 million USD. And Jonathan has joined the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs and is now in Ottawa on a diplomatic post for the Embassy of Israel and holds the position of Economy and Trade Advisor. So Jonathan is going to be kicking off our presentations momentarily. We're also joined by Borik Lizik, the ambassador to the Czech Republic to Canada and the Embassy of the Czech Republic in Ottawa. Borik has served as the ambassador of the Czech Republic to Canada for 1 year. He came from Ottawa from Chicago, where he held the position of Consul General responsible for the U.S. Midwest for more than 4 years. He joined the Czech Foreign Service in 1999, and really since then, he's covered a wide spectrum of agendas at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic, including fighting against terrorism, common foreign and security policy of the European Union, and international economic cooperation. As a diplomat, he spent 10 years of his career in North America and can really provide some insights from his perspective working on this side of the pond. I'm also delighted to introduce Eva Jamanova, the Trade and Investment Section Consulate General in Toronto leader. Eva works at the Trade and Investment Section of the Czech Consulate General in Toronto. And since 2013, she's really been assisting foreign companies from around the world with soft landing in Czech Republic, including due diligence, finding the most suitable location, setting up the business, and connecting to the right business partners. She's been working particularly with Czech startups, so I think is going to bring a lot of great suggestions to today's conversation and really help to launch several programs for their successful international expansion. Currently, she provides assistance to Canadian investors in the Czech Republic and connects Czech and Canadian businesses and research institutions. So welcome, Eva. Looking forward to today's conversation. And then last but not least, we have Melissa Blaustein who is the founder and CEO of Allied Force Startups. Melissa represents And we'll be speaking about a global network of startup policy associations whose goal is really to make the voice of startups heard in government and government internationally. Allied for Startups counts for more than 19 countries on 4 continents as members, including 13 in the EU alone. Her background is in digital policy and advocacy that span local, national, and international levels, having held roles at the White House, UN Women, and the G20 Research Group. So she brings a lot of varied expertise. So we're really excited about learning more about Allied for Startups, and particularly under COVID-19, a number of recommendations that her and her team and a series of working group participants with Allied for Startups have developed to support startups internationally under these challenging times. So really excited to learn more about those recommendations, although I'm fairly familiar with them at the moment myself. We're really excited about bringing those to our network. So a couple of housekeeping items, and I know those were some pretty hefty opening remarks with some wonderful presenters, so we're really excited about leveraging their expertise in today's chat. But in terms of housekeeping, if you do have questions along the way, please use the chat function on the bottom of your screen. I will be facilitating today's conversation, making sure I connect those questions directly to our panelists, but you are more than welcome to use that chat function or the Q&A space to ask directed questions. We will be leaving time at the end of the session to ask questions across all of our panelists, but we do have a very tight agenda, so we will try to squeeze as many in there as possible. And then in terms of outputs to this session, so we will have these sessions pre-recorded, and we will share them online if you'd like to share those with your network. And we will also be sharing a follow-up email with various resources mentioned during today's session, in addition to information about our Canadian Export Challenge. So all of that will be coming to your inboxes after today's session. Okay, so I think we are ready to dive right in. Jonathan, are you ready to begin?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Kayla.
No problem. So I will pass
just share my screen.
Fabulous.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So my name is Jonathan Ehrlich, and I work at the Israeli Embassy in Ottawa, in Canada. So today I'm going to review a little bit about the special relationship between Canada and Israel, and of course the ecosystem, especially for exports in Israel. So I want to start with kick off first with the 2 main partnerships between Canada and Israel. And the first one is Canada-Israel, the Free Trade Agreement. In 2014, Canada and Israel agreed to modernize the Canada-Israel Free Agreement, which is called CXC, a goods-only agreement in January 1st, 1997. Through phases of negotiations, Canada and Israel updated 4 chapters and added 9 new chapters to the CFTA. The modernized CFTA improves access to the Israeli market for Canadian companies through further elimination and reduction of tariffs on agriculture, agri-food, and fish products, with the addition of new inclusive trade provisions on gender, small, medium-sized entrepreneurs, and corporate social responsibility. As well as new labor and environmental protections, the modernized CFTA signals the importance of inclusive trade and ensuring that the benefits and opportunities that flow from trade and investment are widely shared. Since CFTA first came into effect over 2 decades ago, Canada's 2-way merchandise trade with Israel has more than tripled, totaling $1.9 billion in 2018. CIRDEF is the Canada-Israel Industrial Research and Development Foundation, based in $1 million per year from government and the government of Israel. The
Jonathan, I think we might be having some technical issues with the audio on your presentation. Would it be possible to connect perhaps via phone?
Matchmaking.
Oh, goodness. Okay, apologies everyone for some technical difficulties that we're having here. Perhaps, Borik, we can send it over to you at the moment, and then we can coordinate Jonathan's technical difficulties while we get that set up. The joys of technology at the moment. It keeps us on our toes. So Borik would be delighted to introduce you, and perhaps you can speak a little bit about your role with the Czech Republic while we coordinate Jonathan.
Absolutely, absolutely, my great pleasure. Thank you very much, Mila. Thank you, everyone at Startup Canada, for having me today. I greatly appreciate it. I also wanted to say that I'm pleased that Jonathan is with us. I hope he will be back soon. We have quite intensive, not only great friendship between our nations, but also quite intensive cooperation in R&D with Israel. We even have a specialized diplomat for R&D in Tel Aviv. But to the main topic, I would like to say that there is a long, very close relationship between Czech Republic and Canada, and Czech Canadians played an important part, or are an important part of that. And I would specifically say that they are almost our country's best ambassadors, I would say. And I was told quite a few times that one of them, Mr. Thomas Bata Jr., was actually inspiring Canadians to export. At the time when he arrived to Canada as a head of Bata Shoe Company, this company was already global, and whereas most Canadian companies, if at all, they exported mostly only to the US. So with that, I would like to tell a little story about how the Bata company expanded to Africa, which I heard from Mr. Bata. And so the company sent two representatives to the continent, one to the East Coast, one to the West Coast. And after a while, they reported back to the Czech Republic, to Czechoslovakia. And they said, the East Coast representative reported, nobody wears shoes here, there are no opportunities. The West Coast representative reported, nobody wears shoes here, the opportunities are endless. Needless to say, the Bata company always followed the example of the West Coast representative. And with that, I would like to say that I am convinced that even today, there are endless opportunities waiting for you, Canadian startups and scale-ups behind the Canadian borders. And I would like today to present to you why I think that Czech Republic is an interesting partner for you. And so let me switch to my presentation, which hopefully you will be able to see the 7 points that I would like to quickly address in favor of that idea. First, few words about the Czech Republic. We are the member state of the European Union, and I will be referring to that throughout my presentation several times. At this point, I would like to say that licenses issued in the Czech Republic are valid for the whole territory of the European Union. It means to the consumer market of 500 million people. I would also like to say that we are located in the center of Europe, so you're always 2 hours away from Prague to anywhere inside the Union. And not at least as Czech ambassador, I am also pleased that the CEO magazine recently listed our country as one of the top 10 destinations for investment in the post-COVID period. Let me go to the point number 2, which I think is quite important for us and for you. And this is the financial support of Canadian-Czech cooperation in innovation. First, I would start with saying that funds that are already available can be expected to further rise. And I have a few points here why. Both our governments believe that startups will be key for our future success. Canada will also promote its diversification in its international trade. And as Czechs, we know something about dependence on a major trading partner. We are almost as dependent on Germany as you are on the United States. Canada is a priority partner for the EU and vice versa. We adopted a new innovation strategy, according to which we will raise our spending on R&D, and we are already spending most in the region of Central and Eastern Europe. Here is a list of funding options that are currently available. There are some which are available for cooperation just between Czech and Canadian partners, and these are the Delta II and Eureka programs. And there are also programs which require more countries, partners for more countries participating, and this would be Horizon 2020, phasing our horizon into Horizon Europe. This is the major tool of innovation support in the European Union. And also Eureka Globstars, which require partner from Japan. Number 3, I would like to say a few words about Czech industry. We have the highest share of industry in the economy in the European Union, 32.1%. To me, from your perspective, this would mean that you have in that partners with whom you can develop your products as well as customers for your solutions. We have, when you take a look at the main industrial sectors, which I list and the priority areas, I think you can see that there are quite similarities between the Czech economy and Canadian economy, which to me further increases potential for our cooperation. And I also list there that our institutions responded quite well to the COVID-19 challenge, and I list 2 examples of that. Number 4, I don't have a slide for that, is international cooperation, but I would like international environment in the Czech Republic, and this actually leads me to point number 5. This is certainly an example of that. Foreign investors in the Czech Republic. Here is the top 10 investors in the Czech Republic. Here are major investors in IT and software development. And here is an overview of major investors in technology sectors. I would also then go to number 6, which is our advanced R&D infrastructure. The idea of international environment certainly applies to that also. These are just 4 examples of our research centers in different fields. They all benefited from our membership in the European Union. They have state-of-the-art facilities and technological equipment. And as I said, they are very much international, both in terms of international teams working in the Czech Republic, as well as their partnerships around the world, also in Canada. I would also add one more point to that, around 20,000 students leave our universities, graduate from our universities in technological fields or technical fields. Number 7 is CETA, which is the free trade agreement between Canada and the European Union. And I highlighted a few points which I thought might be relevant for Canadian startups. From your perspective, I would maybe explicitly mention the possibility to easier bid in public contracts on the basis of national treatment. The agreement also opened up the services market and even helps to move professionals today through a simple online procedure versus the previous complex visa process. And finally, I would like to say that I'm very much aware, even in my profession, that COVID-19, the pandemic, slowed down the possibilities for our networking and creating new partnerships. But I think startups and scale-ups, dynamic enough, actually well positioned to overcome that through digital technologies. And I would very much like to encourage you to use this time perhaps and not lose time and create some partnerships through which you can then apply for the funding that I mentioned. We already contacted few institutions in the Czech Republic in preparation of the seminar. These are listed here in the slide. Prague Startup Center, Prague Center for Artificial Intelligence, and Czech ICT Alliance. And of course, Czech Invest, our governmental agency, which covers also the portfolio of startups. And I'm very pleased, as you already know, to have with me today my colleague Eva Jungmanová, who represents this agency in Canada from our Consulate General in Toronto. And before I pass the floor to her, I would like to make one more remark, and this is that we have quite rich history of Czech science. For example, contact lens, cell theory, or blood types are discovered by Czechs, and I would like to hope that the Czech-Canadian cooperation will lead to just as impressive results in the future as are listed in this timeline. And final remark, I would just like to say that I, as well as my colleagues, starting with the head of our economic section at the embassy, Mr. Jan Kubachka, we greatly look forward to working with you. Thank you very much for having me again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Borek. And that introduction to Eva was perfectly timed. So we'll pass it over to you, Eva, to speak from your experience of the trade and investment section of the Consulate General in Toronto. So over to you, Eva.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I will just share the screen. So just a minute. Okay. Yeah, no. Should be on. So I will continue with the introduction of the Czech Republic, even though Mr. Ambassador said already many important things. So I will just quickly go through it and maybe just add a few details which can be interesting for you. I will start with short, brief overview of the current situation. The economy of the Czech Republic is very stable. And it's not just because of the strategic location, but as was mentioned already, because of strong participation of foreign investors and also large amount of export-oriented small and medium-sized enterprises we have. So before COVID, the country has a stable growth of around 2 to 3%. GDP growth. This year we expect to drop down to -5, 6, maybe 7%, but the forecast is that probably next year there will be hopefully some growth and recovery of the economy. So we will see what will happen. Definitely what's worth to mention is that the labor market is doing really well. Even before COVID, for a couple of years, the unemployment rate of the Czech Republic was the lowest in Europe, and during current COVID pandemic, the unemployment rate rose only by 1 or 1.5%. So we really didn't experience any massive layoffs. And even though the economic impact of COVID is probably still yet to arrive, but we don't expect any huge rise of the unemployment rate in the future. So thanks to all of the low level of macroeconomic imbalances, thanks to low debt ratios, and also to the positive labor market situation, the Czech Republic has been ranked 4th in the world and 1st in Europe in the Manufacturing Risk Index by Cushman Wakefield, which was done recently, also with the reflecting the COVID impact. So Czech Republic is still really excellent business partner also for Canadian companies. And as was mentioned, thanks to the EU membership, there are many tools how to support mutual trade, investment, and also research collaboration. So let's have a look at the opportunities which can be found in Czech Republic for Canadian companies. These are the main areas, let's say, which we identified as those as the priorities for new businesses and new investments. They pretty much reflect the strengths of the Czech economy. So they are mostly related to traditional industries where Czech companies have a really wide range of capabilities, but there is still a lot of space and many opportunities for new businesses, especially those who come with innovative solutions. In all these areas are existing or emerging platforms to promote innovation and research commercialization. So it brings together all relevant stakeholders like universities, corporations, small businesses, government. And I think these platforms could be the best for start if you want to enter the market. So these areas cover a lot of really many industries and technologies. So I will probably not go through all of them, but I just picked few which might be interesting in relation to Canada. There will be definitely artificial intelligence, which is a big topic everywhere, but just to mention, there is quite a significant number of AI experts in the Czech Republic, considering the size of the country, of course. So for example, only in Prague, there are between 50 to 100 master level graduates every year only in AI, which is, for example, several times more than in Montreal. And the quality and also the price compared to Western countries of the tech talent attracts many multinational companies, which then place their development centers into the country. So for example, there is Facebook AI research working with Czech universities. We have center of IBM Watson in Prague. We have AI teams of Oracle, Honeywell, and Merck, and many other corporations from really different type of industries. I will just show you the Czech landscape, which is quite big. And it involved both Czech and international companies. The Czech companies are particularly strong in cybersecurity. And as was mentioned, last year was launched new AI hub in Prague, which brings all the tech universities and corporations and startups. And the main goal is to create, to build the strong AI ecosystem, which would make Prague as the world-class AI hub. I also have to mention automotive as the largest industry in the Czech Republic, where we also see many possibilities and opportunities, especially with the new technologies. There are almost 1.5 million cars produced every year in the Czech Republic. We are also part of the German automotive cluster. So for example, in the distance of 400 kilometers far from Prague, there are 22 car making production facilities. So it's really a huge cluster. Czech Republic itself has its own car maker called Skoda, which is part of Volkswagen, unfortunately not sold in North America. And also to other car makers, which brings, of course, the whole suppliers from all around the world to Czech Republic. So the supplier base is really, really strong. And some of the key automotive players also has established their center of excellence in Czech Republic. So for example, Valeo has center of excellence for autonomous driving. Bosch has his Center of Excellence for Fuel and Powertrain Systems, Skoda for engines, and so on, which might be interesting for those of you who are active in automotive industry. Skoda also has its own kind of incubator, which is called DigiLab. They work there with different startups and develop new innovative solutions. So could be also interesting for you. They work with startups not only from Czech Republic, but from all around the world. And they focus mainly on sensors, voice detection, and logistics as well. Another really strong sector is aerospace. As we are a landlocked country, we say that sky is our sea. And there is really a long tradition of production, mainly the production of ultralights and sports aircraft. But we have also world-class ability to produce engines. And the Czech companies has really wide range of capabilities in aerospace. So Czech Republic is one of the few countries in the world which is able to construct the whole aircraft in-house. Talking about aerospace, I have to mention also space, because that's another industry we are very active in. Czech Republic and Czech companies are active member of European Space Agency. We cooperate in many European projects, and another interesting possibility for those of you who are in space industry could be the ESA incubators. We have 2 of them in the Czech Republic. The main goal is to transfer the space technologies for the commercial use. So it's very, very popular and very successful. We incubated over 20 startups. For example, there was a startup who used the light material used for space industry and constructed bikes. And we have really many success stories from these incubators. It can be it's open not only for Czech startups but for startups from other countries, and it's very can be very useful because you got 50,000 euro funding. You have the best mentors, experts, not only business-wise but also from the point of the technology, and you get access to the whole European network. So in general, there are really world-class research and technology centers across all different industries in the Czech Republic. We are really strong also in nanotechnologies, new materials, biotechnology, medical devices. For example, 1/3 of world's electron microscopes production takes place in Brno, the second largest city in the Czech Republic. We have also the world's most intense laser system used by scientific teams from all around the world, and many other really interesting projects. So the R&D infrastructure is really advanced and is open to international collaboration. And lastly, I would like to give you a brief introduction of the startup ecosystem, which actually started to boom after 2010. With opening first incubators and with the first investments. Currently there are over 1,000 startups, most of them in the field of ICT, so there will be mainly software as a service, web and cloud services, mobile apps, and others, but also many in the field of IoT, hardware, scientific research tools, electronics, and so on. The ecosystem is still quite young, so when it comes to the capital, we have already some business angels and local VC and private equity funds. We have corporate VCs, but still most of the funding, like 90%, comes from foreign investors. And also Czech startups are mostly financed by own resources. That's also because like 70% of them are really in early stage phase of development. There is really an advanced infrastructure that is supported by expanding network of science and technology parks, innovation centers, various incubators and accelerators. We have incubators by universities, by cities, regions, corporations. Really, the network is really huge and advanced. Recently, the trend is that some of the incubators started to specialize in specific industries or technologies. So there will be usually the corporations which focus on different industries. But for example, there was, I think I already mentioned, that in Prague we have incubator focus on AI or smart city or IoT. The support of startup is also a priority for the Czech government, which creates favorable environment for spin-offs, research, commercialization, and also has programs for startups which want to expand to other markets. We have also startup visa program, which was inspired by the Canadian one, but as it is mainly about the fast track for visa process, I think it's not that interesting for Canadian startups. If you need any more information about the startup ecosystem, you can find anything at our website, czechstartups.org. And I would also like to mention 2 main events connected to startup ecosystem, which are taking place in Prague, which is the Startup World Cup Summit and Futureport Prague. Unfortunately, both of them has been cancelled for this year and are not going online, but hopefully next year there will be another opportunity to attend. And last, I would like to welcome you to our incoming startup mission. If you would like to know more about the Czech startup environment and ecosystem, It's really great week full of events, and you actually get the whole picture of the ecosystem. You can also attend one of the events, the Startup World Cup Summit. We did it in 2019. It was a big success. We had startups from all around the world. Unfortunately, this year again it was cancelled, but hopefully next year we'll be able to organize it again, and we will be happy to have you on board. So that will be all from my side. Here are just some contacts. We would be happy if you get in touch with us for some further consultation. So thank you, and I will give the word to Melissa.
Thank you. Thanks, Eva. And thanks, Borek, for those wonderful and very information-heavy presentations. I think we all learned a tremendous amount during that short period of time. So thank you for providing all of that information. To anybody asking, we will be distributing these slides afterwards. So if you are interested in getting more info, we'll be distributing that. So we will be sorry, I believe we have Jonathan back on the line, so we'll be testing him out in a few moments, but we're going to be passing things over to Melissa to provide a presentation from Allied for Startups to give us an idea of what's happening globally with the startup ecosystem, what are the challenges and some of the recommendations that Allied for Startups is making to government to make sure that supports are in place to navigate through these times and also support us in the future. I have flagged that there have been a number of comments coming through during the initial presentations. I'm capturing them all, and then during our Q&A, we will answer those questions. So over to you, Melissa, to begin your presentation.
Great, thank you so much for having me, Kayla. It's really great to be here with so many interested entrepreneurs in Canada, and also Eva and Borek and David is really great. And Startup Canada is a member of Allied for Startups, and we're so thrilled to have you. And it's really wonderful that you're so engaged and have become really active members. So I'm thrilled. I'm gonna try to share my screen. We'll see how this, whoops, wrong one. Where is it? Hold on, guys. There we go. Hold on, I gotta start over. And I'll tell you a little bit about what Allied for Startups does. Here we go, PowerPoint. Share. And great. Okay, great. So just so you're aware of what Allied for Startups is and who we are and what we do, we are a network of advocacy organizations like Startup Canada that focus on improving the policy environment for startups globally. So we now have actually over 40 members in 30 countries on 4 continents, and we are continuing to grow. CheckUp was one of our Czech members, and so we love your ecosystem and are familiar with it, and it's great to have you guys on to share some of your startup success stories. I know it's a great environment for startups, so it's good to hear from you. And again, also, of course, Israel is a hub for technology and innovation, so I'm looking forward to hearing from Jonathan about that as well. What we really focus on is bringing the voice of startups forward in policy and government. Generally, it's the last thing that you think about when you're starting your company, but it should be one of the first, because if your goal is to be global from day one, then you need to also be thinking about what regulations are going to impact your company's ability to scale. And actually, what we've seen in the face of COVID-19 is that more and more startups are really beginning to pay attention to regulations and how they apply to them, because there is so much government funding available in the wake of this pandemic. So in many ways, there is a silver lining of opportunity, because startups are starting to look closely at what policies impact them and how the government might help them. And the government is starting to look at and think more about how can we continue to drive this very important engine through these trying times, and how do we keep startups going and alive, because they are huge economic job creators, and they also are working really hard to solve many of the problems around COVID. We have a digital health fellow who is focused on following a lot of the e-health startups who are developing tracing technology, for instance, to help track the pandemic and slow the spread. So we at Allied for Startups had an all members call in May to touch base with everyone from around the world on how COVID is impacting their respective ecosystems. And out of this conversation, we established a COVID-19 working group, of which Kayla and Startup Canada are a member. So she will be very familiar with this work. But what we did as a result of those conversations and talking to our members was come up with 13 concrete recommendations from all of our startup organizations to national governments that they could provide that would be helpful to keep innovation moving and allow startups to thrive in the face of this very challenging pandemic. Many of these have a little bit of a European focus, but they can as well apply globally. And of course, we will, I'm going to give a brief overview, but there's also a very detailed report that goes into more specifics, which Kayla will be sending around. So the first one, the first policy recommendation we had was to adapt the temporary framework on state aid liquidity. So when government started to release huge packages saying we have billions of dollars to give to businesses that are in need, because of the requirements associated with and language around what state aid is, many startups weren't eligible because they weren't, quote, in difficulty. However, they obviously were suffering greatly and did need state aid. So we wrote a letter to Commissioner Vestager and immediately got a response around this particular topic. But it's also in thinking about a very obvious, it seems, response, which is to provide state aid itself. So making sure that startups are eligible for that state aid, but also being willing to provide state aid to startups. And these are, the first couple are focused on investment. So the second one is around balancing safeguards and financing needs of the economy to make sure that foreign direct investment is easy and makes sense and flows. So sometimes in a protectionist response, some countries will try to limit the percentage of foreign direct investment, or FDI, or make it challenging for foreign investors to enter into a market. And we are making the case, and I think anyone who's trying to scale their business globally would appreciate any and all availability of investor funds. We're making the case that right now we need to balance safeguards of your economy and of your respective budgets with the financing needs of startups. So be willing to accept a certain level of foreign direct investment, and don't put up a wall around those types of programs because you're wary of acquisitions. Because many countries have responded by limiting acquisitions and saying, you know, foreign companies can't buy or acquire a startup here. So we're trying to say, actually now more than ever, that's really important. So this is an EU focus, but I think that this applies across the board, that there needs to be a really ambitious funding program across the EU and globally so that it's easy for startups to benefit from the aid program. So this is a little bit linked to state aid, but it's more about the packages themselves. So Horizon Europe, which we heard a little bit about from our friends from the Czech Republic, has proposed a $94.1 billion budget in the face of COVID, which is great, but I think we need to continue to expand the capabilities within that budget so that startups are eligible for all of those funds and that they're available. And the same would go for instance, state aid programs in the US or state aid programs in Canada, making sure that they're robust, expansive, and they're providing as much as possible to make investment in startups. So for instance, in the UK, their state aid program or their budgeting funding program is also an investment program. So it's backed by VCs. And so it's not just a free giveaway, it's actually a stake in the business and you're invested in making sure that it grows. Which brings me to number 4, which is a multi-tiered plan to unleash private capital. So right now, more than ever, it's very important that we continue to attract all types of investors and figure out how we can partner, how governments can effectively partner with venture capital firms to say, hey, we're establishing this fund, we're going to put 150 million into it. Would you match the other 150 million, which is a model that we're seeing. And that matching program provides a safe pathway for the VCs to feel like they have a partner in government. And in my view, all of these investment programs are really great because it gives the government a real stake in the development and support of startups. And so they are beyond just committed to saying we want to have policies that are impactful for them, they're directly invested in them. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And then, of course, just strengthen the role of public funding, and in particular in the EU, the European Investment Fund and Investment Bank should be financial partners of startups. And the last piece on investment, and this is something that people don't really think about enough because maybe it's not quite as sexy as the idea of getting just funding, but public procurement is an area where governments can really do a better job of trying to bring on startups and opening their procurement proceedings to startups. And I think it's really exciting and interesting to be able to highlight and showcase startups as your client and say, hey, I really believe in my startup ecosystem and I'm going the extra mile because I opened up my request for proposal to all of these startups as opposed to just using the institutional big provider that you may have always used. this one's really important. And again, also, Eva, you talked about this, and Startup Canada has a startup visa. It's really, really critical that in the face of the pandemic, when so many jobs are, perhaps in question, or there are needs for specific types of engineers in specific places, that it's still easy to have global movement of people and get talent where you need it. And so I would love to see an EU-wide startup visa and some sort of global equivalent. We're seeing more and more ecosystems start to develop this type of program, which is really great. And then, so stock option themes. This has been an area where obviously the US and the UK do a really good job. Canada does a fairly good job. The EU still struggles around taxation of stock options, in particular, the idea that you are taxed on the value of the option before it actually has any real value. So it makes it very difficult to offer it as an incentive to employees, because you're being taxed as if it's worth all of this money, but you don't actually have any of that money. Whereas in the US and other economies, it's taxed as it's exercised. So that's one of the things that we're pushing for, just making it easier to make stock options a more attractive tool for employers to use, because especially when there's less access to funds and finance in general, being able to offer something like stake and equity is an easy way to fill the gap of what you might have had as a payroll budgeting item. Whoops. I love this one. I think it's so important, and this is something that we really need to be pushing for more and more, is really having digital entrepreneurship skills beginning at the primary and secondary school level, starting kids out in kindergarten, learning to get really comfortable with digital literacy, starting out with coding classes, getting everyone across the board to really understand the importance of these skills and create them as more of a part of a curriculum as opposed to an additional add-on. They should be at the core of what folks are learning, especially as AI continues to develop, and it's more and more important for everyone to have access to this skill set. And then, speaking of being able to have digital literacy, it would be really helpful if there was a one-stop shop where entrepreneurs could go to ask all of their regulatory questions. So generally, if I have a regulatory question, for instance, I'm a startup and I've applied for the PPP loan in the US. I have to call the Small Business Administration. I have to wait on hold for probably an hour before I might actually talk to a person. If I'm a business in the EU, I have an office in Dublin and an office in Paris, and I don't know how to enact the GDPR in each respective office. I have to call the Dublin Authority, the Paris Authority, the Commission. We would really like to see more of a one-stop shop to give entrepreneurs a central go-to point for all of the regulatory questions, so that it's not so difficult, because it's already really challenging when you're a team of 4 to spend any sort of time on how to comply. And so making it easier, especially in the face of a global pandemic, is really important. Then the idea of regulatory sandboxes. So yes, it's really important that we level the playing field and that we manage larger, bigger companies, and we're doing the right thing to regulate them responsibly. But at the same time, we should provide a sandbox or a breeding ground or trial place so that legislative tools welcome innovators and they can become very comfortable with understanding and learning to play in the sandbox with a lot of the newer rules, and then move that up the chain as they grow and as they start to really scale and advance. And then this is just extremely important, but I think it applies globally as well, just continuing to make sure that there are harmonized rules across markets. And as we're thinking about trade specifically, that was something that was talked about as well by Eva, and I'm sure that Jonathan will touch on it. Just as much as possible, wherever you can avoid fragmentation and harmonize policy. I think this applies to trade agreements as well as across the EU, to make it easier for businesses to do business and to have one stop for their policy regulation, as opposed to in the EU, 27 different ones. And then that brings me to this point, which is that global trade continues to be a key component for startups scaling abroad, and it should be really easy. It should be easy to move across borders. It should be easy to create a business in Canada and then open an office in the Czech Republic, or move goods across borders from Israel to the US, or transatlantic data flows or global data flows around trade. So this is something that we're also pushing for, is an ease of opening up global trade further so startups have access, especially in the face of this pandemic, to more markets where they can operate. So those are the 13, and that's kind of a brief overview of all of them. I'm putting my email address here in case you want to get in touch. And if you happen to be part of a startup policy association and would like to join us at Allied for Startups, we would love that. And any questions you have, I don't know if I have time to directly, I probably don't have time to directly take questions, but you can put them in the chat box. And I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Startup Canada, for having me, and also to my co-panelists for your great contributions.
Thank you, Melissa. And great. I love that we're tackling this sort of global conversation from so many different angles, that we're talking about export and trade, we're talking about the foundational enablers to support startups so that they can scale up and look at global markets. So all of this, I think, works collectively to really support our collective ecosystem in Canada, but also internationally. So thank you for providing that. And as Melissa said, the full recommendations report will be distributed to everybody via email if you'd like to read that in more detail. Okay, so over to you, Jonathan. It appears that we should be able to navigate some of our tech challenges. Let's give this a shot. So if you'd like to share your
I
presentation.
really hope so. For everyone for the previous session, I'll give it another shot now, and we'll see how it goes.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jonathan. The joys of technology. It's the age we're living in at the moment. We're becoming experts very quickly on Zoom.
Yeah. So I'll recap briefly. So I started by introducing the two very special bilateral collaboration between Israel and Canada. The first one is the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement, which is called SIFTA. The modern SIFTA improves access to the Israeli market for Canadian companies through further elimination of and reduction of tariffs on agriculture, agri-food, and fisheries products, with the addition of new inclusive trade provision on gender, small, medium-sized entrepreneurs, and corporate social responsibility, as well as labor and environmental protections. The modernized SIFTA signals the importance of inclusive trade, ensuring benefits and opportunities that flow from trade and investments are widely shared. The CIRDA, which is the Canada-Israel Industrial Research and Development Foundation. The SIFTA-based funding is over $1 million per year from the government of Canada and of Israel. It stimulates collaborative research and development in companies in both countries to focus on commercialization of new technologies. It pools Canadian and Israeli know-how, provide both countries with improved market access, sustainable competitive advantage, and long-term market opportunity in global economies. It strengthens ties between Canada and Israel and delivers economic benefit to both countries by helping to build resilient companies that develop new products, create new jobs, and generate new global revenue. It has funded over 110 projects in the sum of $25 million from each side, preceded more than 230 bilateral R&D applications. It enables the joint development, marketing, sales of more than 50 technology-improved new products for global markets. It has generated $60 million in initial sales, 300 to 500 million in additional economic value, and it has created hundreds of jobs in both countries. Briefly, there are a lot of Canadian companies in operation with Israel. We've got names like Bombardier, BMO, Claridge, Electronics, Incas, IBI, Magna, Pratt & Whitney Canada, Air Canada, which has sales and service, Bell Helicopter, sales representative, BioArm, Canadian Solar in partnership with insurance agency to develop the solar field. And there's a lot of collaboration in health, which the biggest one is the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation, and a lot of good collaboration between Canada and Israel. Also, FDA, Micropilot, these Canadian companies active in Israel. Also, the IAA, which is the Israeli Innovation Authority, has a lot of international collaboration. And in 2019, companies have received grants as part of the bilateral parallel support and 75 cooperation with multinational cooperation programs. The average grant for these companies was 650,000 shekels per project, which is equivalent to $300,000 Canadian. Companies have received grants of over 70 million shekels per project as part of 39 binational funds programs. Bilateral technologies collaboration agreements for 12 bilateral agreement technologies were signed. A change was undertaken in the division structure and tools, including the establishment of development markets department and the planning unit, and the expansion of its variety of supported collaborations. A little bit about the startup nation ecosystem. So 2019 saw substantial achievements in government activity in support of the high-tech sector. In 2019, Israel Innovation Authority funded 1,650 R&D projects as a total sum of 1.73 billion shekels. The EU also granted R&D scholarship valued at 89 million euros to Israel companies, SMEs mostly, funded by the Israel Innovation Authority, with Israel ranking first place in both the number of grants applicants and in application success rates. So in this figure, you can show the amount of high-tech capital raised in 2019 reached a new peak of $9 billion, a 15% increase compared to 2018. This data from 2019 indicates that the increase in capital raised originated mainly from higher amounts raised in each round rather than more rounds. These higher amounts are a testimony to a wider trend that has been identified by the Israeli high-tech industry over the last decade. The scale-up of existing companies replacing the establishment of startup companies as the main driver of growth. This trend suggested that the Israeli high-tech industry is moving towards a new level of maturity. Data on high-tech export in 2018 reflects the growth of the industry. In 2019, Israeli high-tech export continued to grow and reach an all-time record of $45 billion. About 46% of Israeli exports, an increase of 1.2% compared to 2018, as you can see from the figure above. As for the employment in high-tech industry, the figure indicates in 2019, the number of high-tech employees grew at a growth rate of 8.4% to 321,000, up from 295,000 in 2018. And for the first time, has crossed over 300,000 threshold. Also, for the first time, the ratio of high-tech employees in workforce exceeded the 9%, and today stands on 9.2%. Israel innovation ecosystem maintained its leading position in 2019 and is highly ranked in different international indices. In this figure, is ranked 6th in Bloomberg Innovation Index, went up from 10th to 11th place in Global Innovation Index, and maintained its 6th place position in the Global Startup Ecosystem ranking. In the OECD R&D Intensity Index, R&D investment as ratio of GDP, presented in figure 1.10, Israel continues to hold a leading position, sharing first place with Korea, with its national spending on R&D being 4.5% of the GDP. A little bit about the challenges of the Israeli high-tech. As you can see here, Israel has been dubbed the startup nation for a reason. Over the last decade, the fertile ground of Israel entrepreneurship has yielded over 750 startup companies every year. Israeli entrepreneurs continuously manage to position themselves as global leaders in a variety of fields, repeatedly being able to identify the emergence of new trends and segments early on, maintaining its position in the forefront of global innovation. This figure, you can show that AI has most companies of high-tech sector and will be extensively covered in Chapter 5. Israel entrepreneurs' ability to identify the potential of this field in an early stage and quickly has made Israel a world leader in AI. Beyond AI, there is a significant increase in the number of fintech, cyber and digital health companies, and in capital raised of food tech companies. These sectors are at the cutting edge of global innovation and have been promoted by the Israeli government through various government initiatives. The increase in the number of companies and capital raised in these segments highlighted both the importance of government support and the government's ability to be a driving, motivating engine of new technological sectors in the Israeli innovation ecosystem. Alongside the development of new technological sectors, the dynamic nature of the Israeli innovation ecosystem is also reflected in its ability to quickly reduce activity in fields that are more mature. In this figure, you can see a significant decrease in the amount of capital raised and the number of active companies in communication technologies, as well as a decrease in the volume of capital for e-commerce. These declines may suggest that the aforementioned sectors have matured and face more vigorous competition in the global innovation arena and are less attractive for private capital investment. As you can see as well, in VC investment, venture capital invest as a percentage of the GDP. Israel is a leader, overseeing other countries. Second to it is Canada, Korea, and as you can see, the list goes on. Israel has a lot of investment in technology and R&D, and is really, really proud of it. It also is the second largest number of companies on NASDAQ after China. Up to 75 companies are being put into NASDAQ. Also, from a small survey, is how confident are investors in the markets. So US, Israel, and Canada have the highest confidence ratings in the second year in a row, which is a survey done by Deloitte. And also you can see MNCs of the approximately 400 world's largest companies have chosen Israel for R&D. Amazon, Apple, Autodesk, Facebook, eBay, IBM, Samsung, Microsoft, and the list just goes on and on. And eventually, were some major exits and M&A reaching critical mass in 2017 to 2019. Mellanox acquired by NVIDIA for $6.9 billion. You can see SodaStream acquired by PepsiCo for $3.2 billion. And a lot of exits were made by last few years. Just building confidence in the Israeli market for R&D and collaboration. So that's a brief preview. I hope you could hear me well and everything went by smoothly. If you have any questions, you feel free to email me. I'm here to answer all your questions later on. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jonathan. So if you want to take away your screen sharing, then we'll just go back to our regular panel and open it up to the audience for a few questions. So we have received a number of questions already that are coming through. First, I've received a few messages about getting these materials sent after the session. So all these presentations will be distributed. So you will be receiving that in your inbox after the session. So one of the first questions that we've received, and this I think is directed more to Eva and to Borik, what funding opportunities, if any, are there for building manufacturing facilities in the Czech Republic for Canadian companies? Are there any funds that you're aware of to date?
For sure, we have the national program in investment incentives for foreign companies who wants to invest and build manufacturing facility in the Czech Republic. Nowadays, it's mainly about income tax relief, corporate income tax relief for up to 10 years, and then depends on the size of the company. This would be mainly for manufacturing and some ICT, and then we have many other funds on the national level, as well as the EU grants for R&D research operations. So there are definitely some tools for support of new investments.
Okay, wonderful. And then continuing with the Czech Republic, what is the visa requirement for Canadians to set up in the Czech Republic?
Well, if you want to set up a business, you can just, if you want to come just to make some arrangements, you can always come for up to 90 days. It's like the whole Schengen. And then if you want to stay for longer and set up the business and pretty much move there, then you need the work permit for more than 90 days. And it's normal work permit. You can apply in Ottawa or in Toronto, and it usually takes, I think, now maybe Mr. Ambassador will correct me, but I think it usually takes like 2 to 3 months to get it. And that's why we have the startup visa program, which makes it a little bit shorter. So you can use that for if you are a manager or some critical employee, which needs to be as soon as possible in the Czech Republic.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
I would maybe add, This is again something for Eva more to respond, but of course it is about setting up a company in the Czech Republic. The visa requirement, I don't think that is the major problem for you on that way. If you set up also a branch in the Czech Republic or something like that, then maybe I mentioned that under CETA you will also have easier access for traveling between the Czech Republic and Canada.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bork. And then I think this is really a question to everyone, particularly to the Czech Republic and to Israel. What specific information do you have in terms of renewable energy sector opportunities in terms of exporting or importing? I know this was mentioned in some of the presentations, but perhaps we could just put in some laser-like focus on renewable energy sector opportunities within your countries. Jonathan, over to you first.
Thank you. So in Israel, renewable energy has been a major concern and a major investment with the Israeli government. Alongside recently has the Israeli Ministry of the Economy has declared over $1 billion of grants for anyone starting with hydrogen fuel. Every December, there's a big conference in the southern Israel for renewable energy. As I saw in my presentation, there's a company that's dealing now for major renewable energy done from solar systems, doing plans from solar system in the southern part of Israel, equivalent to 500 megawatts solar system, which will be one of the largest solar power in the world. And I think there's also one here in Ontario, which is almost 500 megawatts as well. So the industry is really boiling with renewable energy in Israel, and a lot of grants from the IEA and the Ministry of the Economy is really building up for solutions. Small country, but we have a lot of sun, so we really use solar energy, and we really promote startups with this area.
Thank you, Jonathan. Eva and Borek, any thoughts on that from Czech Republic?
Well, it's definitely one of the priorities of our government as well, as we have to meet the EU's energy and climate targets for 2030, and we are not there yet. So there will be definitely some programs and action plans in this area as well, in general for renewable energy. And also in clean tech as such, so for smart grid, we have definitely many platforms and associations dealing with that, so we will be happy to get connections and more information on that topic. Then of course it depends on the specific industry within the renewable energy. And also just to mention, there are ongoing some workshops between EU and Canada for this topic, clean tech. So last year in Montreal, we had one of the workshops. So definitely, if you would be interested, you can join. And I don't have current information what's going on. Probably it stopped for a while during the COVID, but definitely there will be some more chapters of it.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I would maybe just add that definitely I would just confirm that this is a priority sector for us. Actually, Czech Invest has a nice overview. Maybe we can send it to our participant, this overview, and he can get just a global idea what we do in research and in terms of companies. We have broad sector, energy sector, also in terms of producing Skoda Doosan, one company which produces huge turbines, or then of course research institutions or projects like high energy 3D accumulator, which is an interesting initiative in the Czech Republic in the area of storing energy. But one more remark, I think Eva mentioned those EU-Canada workshops. There was another one in Ottawa on security, on savings of energy in buildings. Czech companies were present in Montreal, so these workshops that EU and Canada organizes are also opportunities for Czech and Canadian companies to get together. So I would encourage your participants to follow maybe our website, and we will definitely post information about that, or our social media. We'll be posting information about these EU-Canada events there. And so that is about from me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Master. This question is over to you, Melissa. Out of all of your recommendations that have been positioned to various governments around the world, do you have any sense on where the uptake is on the recommendations? Which ones have been the most digestible or most implemented or who has been more eager to implement some of the recommendations as opposed to others? Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of been a race in terms of countries wanting to be the example of the best possible response to the COVID pandemic and supporting their businesses in the most effective way. So they've been very open to the recommendations, particularly in Europe, I would say. France has done an excellent job of responding to many of these concerns, but also the Commission. Commissioner Vestager responded to us directly in our requests around state aid, which was really impressive. And they are taking that very seriously, and several other governments have followed. So because of Commissioner Vestager's response, we had a member in Ireland who was really struggling with the state aid definition, and she was able to use that. Our Startup Poland member was able to take all of the recommendations to the Deputy Prime Minister, and they were very interested in taking them on. So, and we actually did a kind of a rating system to see which countries were most effective at COVID response, and that motivated others to be out in front. And it's been really interesting to be so involved and be a guiding force in terms of recommendations for the governments, because we do see a lot of these things coming into fruition, which is fantastic. And I would say in the US, there hasn't been quite as much of a response, which is disappointing, but Canada's certainly doing a lot. And I think it's an interesting effect of the first person that does it, then the other country wants to do it. And it's sort of like a fun competition in a way. But I think the state aid piece was the first really key, easy example. Obviously different forms of public funding. The ones that have been most challenging, of course, it's a very difficult immigration environment right now. So startup visas are more challenging to advocate for, and we are having some pushback on that in particular. And on the digital literacy piece, that feels like a more long form response to a lot of people. So governments aren't necessarily taking an immediate action there where we would like to see one. I think that there are pathways being open to foreign direct investment. There were some EU countries that were considering serious restrictions around FDIs, and I think that they are rethinking those, which is positive. But in general, the idea of public funding and different versions of what that looks like, whether it's VC matched or otherwise, and hopefully a one-stop shop. That's also something that many of the governments are resisting because of the difficulty of creating a one-stop shop, given the existing red tape in bureaucracy and government that we are all familiar with. But in general, we're making a lot of progress on them.
Fantastic. Thank you, Melissa. So a few other questions. So in terms of promoting that you are exporting to various countries, do any of you have any experience or thoughts on how Canadian startups can really promote the fact that they are exporting in new markets that they might not have staff in, they might not understand the country as well as they do their home base? How do you recommend from a marketing perspective that they get into that right target market into new countries that they're exporting to? Perhaps Eva, I can send that to you first if you don't mind.
Sure. Okay, that's an interesting question, especially in this time. I think digital marketing is very key for all of the activities, even for us. So I would definitely recommend social media that works in Europe as well, like Facebook, LinkedIn, all these ads. And what is really working now kind of to some extent are also all the virtual events, which goes by industry maybe, where you can like partner with the organization or just to go to some B2B meetings and meet with the organizers and promote the services. So that would be my advice.
Wonderful. Thanks, Eva. Borik, any additional thoughts on marketing? I know this is not specifically your subject matter expertise, but more peripherally.
I think I had a similar line of thinking as that. I would perhaps say generally, if you are seeking to export to the Czech Republic, I would encourage you to contact the Canadian Embassy in the Czech Republic. We have a great cooperation with them. And I know what we do in part of, we are really trying to make CETA, the agreement, free trade agreement, work. I know that Canada is strengthening its missions in the European Union, including the Czech Republic, and so are we. So there is a trade commissioner in Prague responsible for helping Canadians to export to Czech Republic. And of course, we are ready to support. There's even a Czech Canadian Chamber of Commerce But I think the start at the embassy, it's a good idea.
Thanks, Boric. Jonathan or Melissa, even any thoughts on putting Canadian businesses on the global stage in terms of marketing?
Sure. So in Israel, best platforms are always the digital platforms. You can always apply through the IAA, Israeli Innovation Authority website, and see calls for proposals there and see all the grants that are being given for international collaborations. Also, the Israel-Canada Chamber of Commerce is a great way to also start. And also, in addition, the Trade Commissioner at the Canadian Embassy in Tel Aviv can definitely put you in the direction and the Israel markets for you through there. And of course, all the work we do here at the embassy is opening the market for Israeli and Canadian. So any result in any result, we can always put you in the right direction.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jonathan. And Melissa, connecting globally, any thoughts on that from your end?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it depends on your industry, but it's always good to establish a contact in the country that you're trying to scale into. So if you're a Canadian business and you want to go to France, you would establish a contact with the business representative, like the person in Ava's role at the embassy, the Canadian embassy in France, who might be able to help you start thinking about how you would move your company forward. I think that that's a great strategy. Obviously, digital marketing, which Ben's mentioned, is a great strategy. I think getting your product out in front of as many people as possible and not being afraid of not having a plan is another thing. I like to tell companies often just start. It can be really scary to think about, how do I move my business across borders? Do I have every step that I've taken? Am I going to have customers? And sometimes you just have to throw spaghetti at the ceiling and see what's going to stick. And I think that for entrepreneurs, that can be a good pathway, but it is always helpful as well to have some point of contact or someone who's going to help push forward your product or your mission. And again, it depends on the industry. Obviously, your point of contact would be different if you're a clean tech company or a construction company than if you're a digital startup. And some of the countries, some countries have really phenomenal programs to welcome global entrepreneurs. For instance, La Franche Tech in France is really fabulous. Startup Delta in the Netherlands is another really great program that offers a lot of pathways for scaling. And then Startup Chile, if you wanted to take your Canadian business to Chile, they actually offer a grant and a visa. So you can get your company started and go from there. Startup Malaysia, they also offer a lot of programs to help you get going. So not just the embassy, but also looking for who are the startup liaisons there who will help you provide all of the resources you might need if you want to start your business and scale abroad.
Wonderful. Thanks, Melissa. Yeah, great feedback. And obviously we're focusing on a few particular countries in this conversation, but there's plenty of additional spaces to also explore. So thanks for adding a few other country examples to provide those opportunities. So I want to thank all of our wonderful panelists for joining us this afternoon and for providing really valuable information. As I mentioned, we'll be sending through all these materials because I know on these webinars it can be a challenge to digest everything and to ask questions and to really engage with the content, but this is a long-term game, thinking about how to support our startups and scale-ups and provide these export opportunities. We need to be providing multiple interaction points with leaders like yourselves and with the overall global ecosystem. So thank you for taking that piece of the pie virtually with us today and speaking to our startups. Speaking of the marketing component specifically and looking at exporting and digital opportunities with our Canadian Export Challenge in the fall, we will be having a presentation from Google talking about behaviors, talking about exporting from that digital sort of perspective with each of our regional spaces, in addition to one-on-one coaching sessions you can have with Google and with our various other partners, with Export Development Canada, the Trade Commissioner Service, UPS. So if you are looking for a bit more of that one-on-one feedback from other partners outside of everyone we have on today, the Canadian Export Challenge in the fall is definitely a wonderful place. So I'll shamelessly plug our CXC program for September. But want to thank Boric and Eva for all of your thoughts and energy putting together today's session. Really appreciate your support. To Melissa, thank you for joining us from the Bay Area, and also from Jonathan, thank thank you so much for joining us and for navigating some technical challenges, which is always a little bit tricky, but thank you for your patience on that. For everybody on the session today, everybody's contact information are on the slides that we will distribute, so you're welcome to connect with our panelists. You're welcome to connect with Startup Canada with any additional questions that you have, but we're talking exporting for the next 2 months straight, so we're happy to provide as much information and connect you with as many leaders internationally as we can. So thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. Thank you to our panelists, and enjoy. Thank you to everybody for participating. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Kayla. Thanks for organizing that.
No problem.
Thanks, Kayla.
Bye, everyone.